In Islam, many Muslims say that they don't accept any name except Muslim. I am a Muslim. Some of them can accept the name Sunni, but a large majority have an allergy for the names of the school like Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanafi, etc. They allege that for them, they pray Sunni prayer. They say, I pray the Sunni prayer, the Sunni Salat. I don't need the Salat of Maliki or Hanafi. Sunni prayer, that's all. First of all, the apparition of new names are linked to a new situation, a new context that appeared after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's natural that those names did not exist yet at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, the names Sunni and Shia are links to the Khalifa after the Prophet Muhammad, the succession. For the Sunni, the four Khalifa are reliable and are authentic companions and trustable like Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. And for the Shia, Ali should have been the first Khalifa, and the three other Khalifa are traitor, betrayed Ali and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The three other Khalifa impeached Ali to become the first Khalifa and made a plot. Secondly, it's very important to know the difference between the war of the swords and the blood and the war of the pens and the intellectual war of ink and pens. In our history, we know very well the importance of the battle, like at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the battle of Badr, Uhud, etc. And after his death against the false prophets, like for example against Musaylama. And also the invasion, the Islamic invasion against Roman and Persian. We know the importance of all these battles. And from this battle, we gave the fighters rightly the title of martyr or hero, like the famous Khalid ibn Walid, who was maybe the best fighter of all the time, as he remained undefeated during all his battles. But another kind of war occurred during the history of Islam, and this kind of war were imperceptible and invisible. This is the war of the pen and of the ink that sprayed. The fighters of those kind of wars, these intellectual fighters, nowadays are unknown and anonymous, although they had a great part in the history of Islam. This war is not a bloody war to hate or kill people, but it's a war of the words. It's a war of debates and arguments. How to convince other experts, or how to convince mass people, how to convince emperors, etc. It's a war of the pen and the ink that sprayed. It's a war, how can I synthesize my dogma in a document or in a book? So it's very important to know the history of those intellectual battles and to know that the scholars, the ulama of our community won century after century those battles against the other sectarian groups. But nowadays we are like spoiled children that forgot the history and that the scholars protect us against the fact that our religions should have been distorted or deviated without them. Without them, our religion should have been disfigured until disappearing. But we are spoiled children that are eating a great meal on the feast table served in a silver tray. We forgot history and we are unthankful, and we forgot that those scholars sacrificed for us. We are a spoiled child if we say that we are practicing the Sunnah Salat and that we don't need the Salat of the 4 Imams. The second and the third generations of scholars after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ prepared us an easy way and adapt a methodology that can be practiced throughout the centuries and in all the world. We have everything perfectly prepared and we are spoon-fed like a baby fed by his mom. Somebody saying, I am practicing the Sunnah pray and I don't need the 4 Imams pray is like a teenager that have a little boat and say, I go now to Mecca for the pilgrimage. It cannot actually extract from the Quran and Sunnah the way how to pray. So we will have to wait for one of the 4 great boats of the 4 Imams, and then we'll ride one of them and we'll arrive safely in Mecca. All this thanks to the methodology of the scholars of the 3rd generation that can be compared to great sellers' maps. This methodology was built from the Quran and Sunnah and also from the oral transmissions from Rasulullah ﷺ to the different companions to the 2nd and 3rd generation scholars. Our modern generation, we all take the great boat of the 4 Imams, and at the end we say, I don't need the prayer of the 4 Imams, I pray the Sunnah pray. Because even if you don't know it, you must know that your prayer is largely inspired from the prayer of one of the 4 Imams, who took it from his sheikh, and his sheikh took it from a companion, and this companion took it from Rasulullah ﷺ. So saying, I just pray the Sunnah pray is an aberration. And this is a serious mistake. As Rasulullah ﷺ said in a hadith, the one who is not thankful to people is not thankful to Allah. So how our generation forgets to be thankful to our great ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, the great ulamas, the great scholars, those warriors of the pen. And it's also being unthankful to say, I respect the 4 Imams, but they are only men. They made mistakes, so I mixed of the 4 schools. So it's like mixing in a kebab sandwich, a little bit of onion, a little bit of tomato, and a little bit of sauce. And it's like that kind of person know everything. And when they speak about the 4 Imams, they don't have a good behavior. They will say 20 times during the conversation that the basis is that those 4 Imams are men and that they made mistake. He will say it maybe 20 times during the conversation. So it's not a good behavior. It's in contradiction with the spirit of the Quran and the Hadith that rise the scholars in a very high level. First of all, in the Quran, Allah said only the scholars fear Allah. So we can see how Allah raised the level of the scholars. And also there are so many hadith about the wonderful statutes of the scholars. Like the hadith, the scholars are the heirs of the prophets. The heirs. So it's a very heavy word. And even the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, would have announced the first three imam. First, he announced Abu Hanifa by pointing with his finger Salman al-Farisi, the Persian, and said, from him will come the star of the scholar. And Abu Hanifa was a Persian like Salman al-Farisi. Secondly, Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, announced Al-Imam Malik. In the book Kitab al-Shifa of the Maliki scholar Qadi Iyad, Prophet Muhammad will have said in a hadith, the Imam of Medine, the whole world will come to him to profit of his science, and they will come by walk, by horse, by camel, and all the way to him. And finally, the Prophet may have announced Al-Imam Shafi'i, saying, will come in the future the scholar of Quraysh, because Al-Imam Shafi'i is a pure Arabic from the tribe of Quraysh. And 1,000 years after, our modern generation is not aligned with the spirit of the Prophet to rise the four Imams. As when we start to talk about them, we often say, I respect them. So we don't say, I admire them. And then during the conversation, we will continually belittle them by saying they are men, human beings, and they made mistakes. Even if some of us say formula like I bring the four imams on my head to show respect, but then they will point out that they are above all human beings that made mistakes. So it's a lack of respect. And when we talk about modern Saud scholar, it's different. For example, if you say the name Sheikh Al-Albani, people will admire him and point out that he's the scholar of the century and that is a freak of the science, without saying that he's a human that made mistakes. Even one guy I met made with his arms a sign of a mountain, like rising his arm saying Albani, a mountain. And actually Albani was 1,000 years after the Salaf, the century of Salaf, and learned the science in the library by himself. And even when we will talk about another subject like football, the person will say that the superstars like Mbappe or Cristiano are freaks of the football, and then they are human of the football. They will not point out that they are above all human and that they made mistakes. It's very rare to talk about a legend to start by saying he's above all a human being that make mistake, and we are doing it with the four imams. This is a very serious lack of respect, and it explains why our civilization fell, the Islamic civilization, and why we are down in all the fields in our modern epoch. Because a civilization is falling when its members forget the depth that they have on the great figures of this civilization. And that's why nowadays the Muslim community is turning in a circle as they follow the routine and they follow their own understanding, and they have given up the ancient methodology of the great imams. So the consequence is that we will highly reduce our understanding of the Quran and Sunnah as we only keep our own opinion or the opinion of limited modern scholars. So many Muslims will, in their everyday life, read the Quran from the first chapter to the end and read it again and again, but without digging by the understanding of the great scholars and remain with their own understanding. It will have consequences on the society as everything is linked, and it's not by chance that the modern Muslim society are not on the top nowadays economically and in all fields. The Muslim societies nowadays are on the bottom because they don't keep the tradition, and on the contrary, the ancient great Islamic civilization like Sham, Iraq, or Andalus were built by the long and ancient tradition of the four Imam schools and by the Sufis, the spiritual. Both were linked. To revert our subject, is very important to follow one of the four Imams, one of the four schools, because those Imams is a link to the spiritual chain of the Prophet, the chain of the scholars that revert to the Prophet Muhammad. Like the genealogical tree of the Prophet, but not by blood, but by science. All those schools are called by the name of an Imam, of a man, and they are not called by name like the school of the mountain or the school of the son of science. All this because all those Imam are a link from sheikh to sheikh to revert to Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. And same for the Sunni dogma school al-Ashariya that designed Abu al-Hasan al-Ashari, al-Imam of dogma. This is the condition to be considered as a scholar in the Sunni path, to have a chain of master from master to master that revert to the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. And it's a necessarily condition. Without it, you cannot be considered as a scholar. To sum up, to interpret directly Hadith and Quran was like a foggy mountain on a huge ocean in a storm. It's impossible for mass people, so the scholars help us to have an organized methodology and specific vocabulary that are like signs, boards, and spots on the road, and help us to apply the Sunnah of the Prophet totally safely and without the risk to be misled by our own interpretation. Another image is that the companions adapted the Quran from a raw diamond and cut it, as the Quran was written only on animal skins, to a cutted, adapted diamond that we can wear, meaning they adapted the Quran in the form of a book. Then, the next generation of Hadith scholar like Bukhari went to the foggy mountain to collect Hadith and make some organized books. Without them, the Sunnah of the Prophet would have disappeared. And then, when the Hadith were collected, there was the difficulty between the Hadith Sahih and the weak Hadith that had to be sorted. and to select them as some hadith sahih were abrogated or not usable. And this is the fuqaha, the scholar of fiqh, who guided the scholars of hadith. As the scholar of hadith didn't have enough science to understand. For example, the famous scholar Ibn Wahb, who followed Imam Malik, and before that he was only a scholar of hadith. So Ibn Wahb said, any scholar of hadith that doesn't have a scholar of fiqh to guide him is misled. Without Malik and Layth ibn Sa'd, we would have been totally lost. Malik was saying me, take this hadith and throw this one. I was in the illusion, believing that all the hadith sahih were applicable. And we can see in our epoch that this is the same problem, where people think that the hadith sahih are foolproof. And this effort of interpretation come from the will of Allah. As if Allah wanted, He could have done that the Quran should have entirely been prepared as a book by the angel Jibril or by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was alive. But it was not the case. Allah wanted to show that the Muslim community is not dependent only on the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, but also on all the community after him that made great effort and showed all the qualities that must have a Muslim. They developed huge qualities of communication, solidarities, and very high level of brightness by digging and always try to understand more and more. And they also developed a great sense of adaptation. All those qualities that make the Muslim believer a bright person. And all those qualities are essential in any field, either it is in sport, in intellectual field, or in art. But like we say, our community is going around in circles because we are forgetting the great figures of our history, in where we forget our own history. So we forget at the same time our own identity. The consequence is that from part to part, it creates a community that follows some superficial and robotical religious practice, and also some unthankful autodidact that pick from here to here, and at the same time don't evoke the depth we have toward those figures. So to resolve this problem, we must deeply study the first Islamic period of the Tabi'in and Tabi'in. It means the follower and the follower of the follower. This is the period just after the companion, and that period had a special context. And if we don't do it and constantly repeat that I follow only the Quran and the Sunnah, we will be in an illusion or like a blind man in a desert. Or we will be like a naive child that while manipulating a kite think that he is manipulating a military drone. So the conclusion of this first part is to stop saying, me, I am praying the Sunnah prayer. I don't need the 4 Imams. Or me, I interpret directly the arguments directly from the Quran and the Sunnah. I don't need the four Imams. Many modern groups, and especially the Wahhabi Salafi, are deceiving their followers with the sentence of Imam Malik or Shafi'i, saying, if you see a hadith sahih that contradicts my words, so choose the hadith sahih and throw my words. This sentence was said to the students and the disciples of the Imam that reached the level of Mujtahid Mutlaq. It's a very high level where the scholar can interpret freely the Quran and the Sunnah. So this sentence is for an elite, rare like a red diamond, and it's not for the taxi, the butcher, or the normal person. So it's not for populace, but it's for top expert, like in football, if all the golden balls were talking together. So for example, in the image, the words of Zidane to Cristiano are not for the mass people, but only for Cristiano. So it's the same for the sentence of the Imam Shafi'i or Malik. Be humble, it's not for you.